Hello and welcome to Pressbox. On this week's show, we'll look back at the Reds' Champions League group campaign. It ended with a draw in Denmark, with Liverpool top of the group and heading through to the last 16 as group winners. We'll also debate the pros and cons of academy football and turn our attention to the weekend's clash with Fulham. My guests on this week's show are broadcasters Steve Wilson and Alan Irwin. Steve, you were on commentary duty for the game last night in Denmark. What did you make of it? It was an interesting situation for Liverpool. Very rarely does the club have dead rubbers, but that was essentially what it was. How did you think they dealt with that occasion?
It was a useful exercise for some, wasn't it? I mean, obviously, very much so. For Clarkson, would have got a lot out of it. Billy Cometio got his first appearance. I think he looked a little anxious at times. There weren't any bad injuries to key players. I'm not sure what the Tsimikas problem was, but I think that Klopp will look back on it and say, yeah, okay, he'd have liked to have won the game, but, there were more important things about last night's match. And it was, I think Midtjylland probably surprised me. I don't know. Probably didn't surprise Klopp, but they surprised me. I thought they were a little bit better than I expected them to be. I've got to be honest. So, in the end, it was a pretty hard-earned point, wasn't it? Really.
Steve, when it's a game like that, when there's nothing essentially riding on it, does that make it more difficult to prepare for you from a work point of view, or are you looking or waiting to see what stories unfold? How do you view a game like that?
No, I mean, I approach it, more or less the same, really. I mean, obviously, I suppose in the way you kind of, deliver a commentary on a Salah goal after 55 seconds in a dead rubber is obviously very different from how you'd do a Salah goal after 55 seconds in a title decider against Man City or something. It's relatively low key. But in terms of the preparation and everything else, you never sort of want to skimp on preparation because you never quite know what's going to happen. But for example, you could end up doing the Paris Saint-Germain Istanbul Başakşehir game, and then you're gonna need sort of recourse to all the prep you've done when the players walk off. So, I thought it was an okay point for Liverpool, a reasonable performance, and as far as we know, no serious injuries. So I do think Tsimikas got a knock. Fabinho going off at halftime looked pre-planned, I think. And, hey, they're unbeaten from 3 away games in the Champions League group stage, and they've won the group. So, let's not complain too much about anything last night.
Yeah, that PSG game, a good example of why commentators should always check who the fourth official is. In terms of the game last night, Alan, one of the things that stood out, I think, throughout his time, but particularly so recently, is the way in which Jurgen has picked a team to get a job done. How impressed were you with the way you went about it last night and that balance of young players and senior players to do enough to get through the game kind of unscathed?
I think it's always difficult for a manager when you're placed in a situation where it becomes a dead rubber, as Steve has mentioned. It's difficult to get that balance right because there isn't a shadow of doubt that Jurgen Klopp will be thinking about the week ahead and Fulham, followed by Tottenham, etc. And the plethora of games that come their way in December. So I thought he got it absolutely spot on last night because they were in a position where he had that experience with the mixture of youth and Leighton Clarkson obviously being the prime example of somebody who's in there with his debut alongside more experienced players, which is always crucial for a young performer. I think if you throw too many into a starting 11, it becomes much more difficult, as was probably evidenced to a degree in the second half with Billy Cometio, who alongside Reece Williams again, that inexperience showed a little, and it wasn't until the more experienced, the likes of Henderson and Firmino on in the second half that Liverpool got a bit more balance in the game and became a bit more structured in the approach because they'd become a little bit vulnerable in the opening 20-25 minutes of that second half before a few more changes were made with Robertson as well coming on. So, when you look at the side that finished the game, it was pretty strong, to be honest with you. But overall, I think it is a difficult one because many of the fans would have, been looking at it last night thinking, this is just going to be going through the motions, really. It was helped by that Salah goal early on. I think Klopp overall got the balance exactly right. In fact, he may have surprised a few in that he went with so many experienced players in the initial starting 11.
Do you think one of the things, Al, that's developed over his time is that we've now got to a situation where there's a DNA of how the teams play across the club. So when young players come in, they know what's expected at first team level. It's a little more seamless now if 2 or 3 slot in. They're kind of ready for it when they get to play on that stage.
Yeah, it's clearly evident that the approach and the work ethic and the style of football runs right the way through the club, and that is evidenced every time we see one of the so-called youngsters or new boys being brought in alongside those more experienced players that we've become accustomed to see week in, week out. So, and I don't think Jurgen Klopp or any of his coaching staff would throw these lads in if they were not ready and had shown that the right attitude and approach right throughout their time with the club. And their experience that they're gaining is absolutely crucial. But we all know that Leighton Clarkson's not going to start the next Premier League game, and it's going to be a while before we see him on a more regular basis. And that's the wrong word to use, isn't it? Because it's very, very difficult to break into a starting 11 that Liverpool put out week in, week out in the Premier League. So it's invaluable for these lads, but I think you can clearly see that the pathway that has developed, and these are very, very good players who may well be able to walk into championship clubs and certainly those lower down the pyramid, and to a degree, possibly, some of the clubs in the lower echelons of our own Premier League.
I think Alan's absolutely right. I think, clearly the kids, the likes of Nat Phillips and Reece Williams and Clarkson, I thought played very well last night. The kids have really impressed. The very, very young players have impressed. If I trying to sort of second guess, if Jurgen Klopp has a worry, I think it might be that the reserves with the bigger reputations, if you know what I mean. And I suppose here I'm talking about Origi, Minamino, Tsimikas, these players who are more experienced. They're not raw youth, and they're there to put pressure on the players who might be, play more first 11 football. To me, they're not doing that. I don't look at Origi or Minamino or Tsimikas picking out those 3 and think that they're putting pressure on anybody at the moment. I would be wanting more from them because they have the experience, they have the games under their belt, and at the moment, to me, they're not giving Klopp a problem in team selection. I don't think they're putting pressure on the people who Klopp would like them to be putting pressure on.
On that, Steve, we probably put Kostas Tsimikas to one side because he's not been here that long and has had a few injuries along the way. Minamino's slightly the same, but in terms of Divock, I guess he's the conundrum because he's made such a big impact on the biggest games throughout his time. He's written into the history regardless of what happens from here. But for some reason, it doesn't quite work for him when he gets his chances. Is that because of the way the team works? Is he asked to do something different to what's his natural game? What do you think the problem is for him?
I think it is a problem for him to a certain extent in that he is very unlike any of the other 4 Liverpool forwards, if you like, including Jota, obviously now. And so, if you play with Origi, then probably the team needs to play in a slightly different fashion from that which they play sort of, week in, week out. So that's a problem for him. I'm not sure where they go with Origi. I mean, as you say, he's been a scorer of great goals in terms of their importance to the club, and obviously, it absolutely deserves every bit of respect he gets for that. But there's no question that he is comfortably 5th in the pecking order of Liverpool strikers. And to me, and I've seen a bit of him, he's not played a lot this season, but I saw obviously last night's game, the Lincoln City game where he did score, little cameo appearances here and there. I think I've probably seen most of his appearances. And to me, he's not once left the pitch with Jurgen Klopp thinking, maybe I need to give Divock a chance in the Premier League at the weekend. I just don't think that's happened. And I'm not sure now that it will.
I suppose, Alan, taking that aside, and maybe one or two who haven't stepped up and delivered, the team have still navigated their way through the group, 13 points across the games. As mentioned before, undefeated away from home. How pleased will Jurgen Klopp be with that, given the fact he's lost key players at key times in the build-up and throughout that 6-game run?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because eyebrows were raised after the home defeat against Atalanta, and maybe there was a slight worry that Liverpool would really have to battle to qualify, but it didn't turn out that way. In fact, heading into last night's game, if they'd have won it, I think they would have had the record number of points in a Champions League group stage. So they've never really had an easy passage through to the knockout stages in the past. So I think Jurgen Klopp will be absolutely delighted that they navigated their way through quite comfortably in the end. When you go into the final game with nothing to play for, it's always a great situation to be in, given the amount of games that obviously we have to play in the Premier League, in domestic football in England. So and the adjustments he's had to make. I mean, Liverpool have been beset by an enormous amount of injuries that they haven't really been used to over the last couple of seasons. And it's strange to look at the results since the injury to Virgil van Dijk, and Liverpool have only lost that game against Atalanta. So it really has been a fact of players knuckling down and putting themselves into a position to give Jurgen Klopp something to think about, really. And those that have stepped in and have stepped up to the plate have done exceptionally well. And defensively, you could say that Liverpool have actually performed better since Van Dijk's absence, which is something none of us would have envisaged when that happened against Everton.
Jurgen Klopp and his backroom staff are the masters at finding solutions to problems. Finally, before the break, Steve, just want to get your thoughts. You mentioned commentating on the Mo Salah goal. He's 22nd in the Champions League. He's now the record scorer in the competition for the club. Can you put that into context for us? Obviously, he's played a lot of games. He's playing in a good team. But still, just give us an idea of how impressive a statistic that is.
I mean, it is very, very impressive. You do have to put it into context. I think Neymar scored his 49th Champions League goal yesterday for Paris Saint-Germain. Clearly, if you include the European Cup, then Mo Salah has got a bit of work to do to catch up with Rushy and some others. But, he is a devastating finisher, Mohamed Salah. And I think it was just, the fact he played 90 minutes last night, who would have envisaged? I think most people were surprised he was A, in the starting lineup, and B, that he stayed on the pitch for 90 minutes. And the reason for that is because Mo Salah never, ever can quite satisfy his hunger for scoring goals. So for Salah last night, that game would have been a mouth-watering opportunity to break the record, which obviously he did. And, he probably would have walked off the pitch a little bit disappointed, A, that Liverpool didn't win the game, but also that he didn't get further goals, because he is just insatiable when it comes to wanting to put the ball in the net. And, people talk about the rivalry with Sadio Mane, and has it at times verged on perhaps one not passing to the other. We can all think of little incidents here and there. But in the bigger picture, this is fantastic for Liverpool, because those two guys are both desperate to be Liverpool's top scorer every season, to be the Premier League's top scorer every season, the Champions League's top scorer every season. And they push each other on, and it can only be good for Liverpool.
I think one thing's for certain, he won't be passing to Divock again after last night's effort. OK, we'll pause things just there. We'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll turn our attention to who the Reds may face in the last 16 of the Champions League. We're back soon. Hello and welcome back to Press Box. Before the break, we were looking back at the conclusion of Liverpool's Champions League group campaign. They progressed as winners of Group D, booking their place in the last 16. Now, Steve Wilson and Alan Irwin, my guests on the show this week, will get to cast their eye over the prospective opponents for the Reds in the next round. The teams Liverpool can draw as group winners are Atletico Madrid, Borussia Mönchengladbach, FC Porto, Sevilla, Lazio, Barcelona, and Leipzig. I just wonder, looking at those teams that are through, Alan, who could be drawn against the Reds, if there's any that stand out for you as ones you think, no, I don't want them, or is it a pretty open draw for you in that regard?
Yeah, don't want Atletico Madrid. I think that would be the mantra from many Liverpool fans. We've been there before, haven't we? So in that sense, it might be one that they want to avoid. I mean, they are top of the La Liga at the moment, aren't they? And are always a difficult team to break down, aren't they? They are so organised defensively and able to counter and eke out 1-goal victories week in, week out. They're somebody that I would not necessarily fear, because everybody will not want to come up against Liverpool. But I think out of the 7 possibilities there, they would be the ones that stand out as if it did come to pass, as stated, that would be a very difficult last 16 tie. I think you'd look at the other Spanish sides at the moment, and Barcelona are not pulling up any trees. In La Liga, they're struggling themselves and lost again last weekend, I think. So they're having a difficult time with it, and you'd fancy Liverpool over 2 legs against any of the other sides that you've mentioned there, Mark. So in that respect, if you wanted me to pull one out and say, this is the ideal draw, I think you'd probably go for Porto. The Portuguese football is never, I feel, as strong as the Italian or Spanish leagues, and I'd even take Borussia Mönchengladbach, which will bring back many memories for Liverpool fans of a certain age, going back to the first ever European Cup final victory. So they're not in the top 6 at the moment, I don't think, in the Bundesliga. So I think Liverpool would certainly be able to get the better of Borussia Mönchengladbach. In fact, any of the other 6, although the Italian sides always make it difficult. So I'll take Porto or Borussia Mönchengladbach.
Yeah, Gladbach, they're 7th at the moment in Bundesliga. A lot of the teams are actually struggling. Lazio is sitting 7th, Sevilla is 6th, Barcelona are incredibly at 9th in the Liga. A lot of the teams Liverpool could be drawn against aren't having the best of domestic runs. I just wonder, Steve, speaking last night after the game to Jan Molby, speaking to him about who Liverpool could potentially draw, he was more going for what kind of style of play the team would bring. And he said he'd rather maybe face one of the German teams that would come at Liverpool, give them a game, than a tighter team like an Atletico. Do you go along with that kind of school of thought?
Oh, absolutely. I think Borussia Mönchengladbach would be great. It'd be a great watch because they play a little bit like Leeds. They score a lot of goals. They concede a lot of goals. I think it'd be a high-scoring tie, and you'd probably say that Liverpool's quality would see them through. Leipzig are a little bit like that. I think they're more dangerous than Borussia. I think they're a better side than Borussia Mönchengladbach. Semi-finalists in the Champions League last season. It would be one on paper that people might go, that's a good draw for Liverpool. But actually, I think that'd be a really tough one. The one thing that for me, Leipzig don't have at the moment is a quality number 9 or a really, really dangerous finisher. They've missed that this season, I think, and look a little bit short in that department. Atletico Madrid would be horrible. It could all go badly wrong against them. I would have a bad feeling about playing Atletico Madrid, as a lot of people would, though, obviously it'd be really nice to be able to sort of draw a line under not only last season's game, but also the semi-final of the Europa League back in whenever it was, when, very similarly to last season's Champions League game, Atletico won at Anfield in extra time and went on to win the Europa League. Sevilla, I think I'd rather probably avoid, to be honest. But I think Liverpool would get through. Same goes for Barcelona, because Messi obviously can just do Messi-esque stuff, but you'd probably fancy Liverpool on current form. I'd take Lazio and Porto all day long. But I hope, for the kind of, the sentimental reasons, if you like, that it's Borussia Mönchengladbach, but also because I just think it would be fantastic 2 games of football.
Yeah, one for a bit of nostalgia as well, and would be a fabulous. What would be nice as well would be, it's a different name. What I like about some of these draws, Al, is there are a few teams we haven't faced or faced for a while. So it offers up a little bit of variation. I know most on the Champions League will come round quite a lot, but the likes of Lazio, Mönchengladbach would be something a little bit different.
Yeah, I think so. And I think Liverpool's supporters would look forward to that as well. And what you also have to bear in mind that, Steve will be very much aware that by the time these fixtures come around, Barcelona could be flying high at the top of the La Liga come February for all we know, because these ties won't take place until round about the middle of February, I think it is. So things could look a lot different. You don't know how squads are going to be affected by injuries, so that can play a part. But yeah, I think they will be looking at the draw and hoping that they don't get Liverpool. But I'd go along with Borussia Mönchengladbach would be ideal, really. And okay, we're not going to be in a position where certainly don't think we're going to be in a position where fans will be able to travel over by any stretch to Germany. But hopefully we're in a position where a lot more fans can be inside Anfield to at least witness the demise of Mönchengladbach in the second leg, which will be played at Anfield. So, yeah, there are some tasty teams left in it, but that's exactly what the competition should bring.
Yeah, just to reiterate, Liverpool as group winners will be away from home first, then back at Anfield. The first leg's played 16th, 17th of February. The second leg, so that'll be the home leg for Liverpool, will be the 9th or 10th of March. In terms of the bigger picture, Alan just touched on there, Steve. Barcelona not doing well at the moment domestically, albeit that could change near the actual fixtures. But are there any of the big teams that have caught your eye and you think, I'd rather avoid them this season in the competition, generally speaking? Or indeed, is there a team that stood out and you think they're the favourite this year? Or is it quite an open competition, the Champions League this time round?
Well, I mean, you can't discount Bayern Munich. They just look every bit as good as they looked last season, I think. I think Paris Saint-Germain, that will be a really, really, if Liverpool end up playing Paris Saint-Germain at some point in the competition, that is going to be a really tough game. I quite fancy them for this season's Champions League. And obviously there's the prospect of, perhaps yet another all-English tie somewhere down the road, Chelsea or Manchester City, maybe in the latter stages. You'd probably rather avoid that. It's great if you win, but horrific if you don't. And Liverpool have been on the right and wrong end of those games in the past over the years, on the right more than the wrong. If I had to stick my neck out, I would say that probably the favourites at this stage are last season's finalists, Bayern Munich and Paris Saint-Germain.
Just in the bigger picture of the Champions League campaign, Al, Liverpool looking to compete in the competition. They also have obviously aspirations of retaining and defending the Premier League crown. Do you think Jurgen and his team will be of a mind to add to the team in the new year? Or do you think the performances of the young players and the way they've dealt with injuries will say, you know what, actually we can ride it out till the summer? What's your view?
I think managers should always be looking to strengthen it. It's been something that's run through the football club for a long, long time. Even, you go back to the Bill Shankly, Bob Paisley days, they were always looking to strengthen, even when they were at their very, very peak and winning leagues year in, year out. So I think you should always look to strengthen, but it's if you're unable to, because you want to bring in the right players in the right position at the right stage of their careers as well. When it comes to the January window, somebody has got to be ready to step right into your starting 11. That's how I see it anyway. You've got players coming back from injury now. Still got Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain to return as well. Naby Keita was back last night. So in that sense, maybe the squad is big enough to contend with everything that's going to be thrown at them from now onwards. Never mind January onwards.
Yeah, Steve, Jurgen, history tells us, tends to sort of wait until he gets the man he wants. He ignored the clamour to bring in a left back to wait for Andy Robertson. They ignored the clamour for a centre back until they could get Virgil van Dijk. But bear in mind what you said earlier about the fact that some of the middle players haven't quite delivered. Do you think he will be tempted to rejig things in January?
I think he'll probably at the top end of the pitch in the Origi Minamino kind of area, I think he'll probably leave it as it is. I wonder whether they may consider, I don't think they'll do anything big in January, but I wonder whether they're looking down the list of experienced centre halves across Europe who maybe only have, 6 or 18 months left on their contract, who might be in the 30, 31 age bracket, who would come in and do a job if called upon in the latter half of this season, maybe on a sort of, 2-year deal or 2.5 or even 1.5-year deal or whatever it is. Somebody who is not asking to be first pick in the team because he realizes his position in the pecking order, but who is happy to be a cover centre half and who is of an age where he's not going to be blocking the progress of the young players that Liverpool have coming through in that position, because it'd be pretty soul destroying for Reece Williams, for Nat Phillips, if suddenly Liverpool go out and buy, Upamecano or Skriniar or Koulibaly or somebody like that for kind of, 50, 60 million pounds, because it basically means that their future at Anfield is taking a huge step back if you're a young player in that position. So I don't see them doing that. But having said that, I do think, given the injury record of Joel Matip, and given that playing Fabinho as a centre half can leave you short in midfield if you pick up injuries there, as Liverpool have, for me, they need an experienced central defender. Now, that may be a stopgap short-term option. And they may just be scouring the list of players who don't have long to go on their contract, but who have 300 or 400 games under their belt in their career, have done a bit, people know, very experienced, wise old heads who could just do a job for a short period of time and who aren't expecting to be first choice on Liverpool's team sheet.
Somewhere in Italy just now, Ragnar Klavan's ears have pricked up. He's waiting for the call.
Exactly. Well, do you know what? I wish I'd thought, exactly that kind of player, that kind of guy who can come in and just be a great lad around the place and maybe, play for 45 minutes, here and there and not moan about it, but just do a job and get it done quietly.
Okay, we'll watch this space come January. We'll pause things again, take another short break. When we come back, we'll talk about academy football, the pros and the cons. We're back soon. Hello and welcome back to Press Box. And now, this week in the Champions League, yet again, a couple of Liverpool's academy players stepped into the breach and did a job for the club. It's been a theme in recent seasons, but not all clubs turn to their academies or view them in quite the same way. This week, Birmingham City, the latest to announce that they are actually scrapping the academy side in favour of effectively running a B team. They see it as a better way to provide quality players for the first team and players ultimately they can sell on. So what do our guests this week make of all that? Alan, it's an interesting one. First and foremost, from a point of view of an aspirational view, I guess, do a club like Liverpool, like Everton, Manchester United, Man City have to have an academy to give young fans, young kids in the area the dream of making it through and progressing through the ranks?
I would like to think so. I think that should be a categoric yes, although it is very, very difficult for those youngsters who spend an awful lot of time in academies to actually make the progression right the way through to the very top. It is a very, very small percentage, but whichever way you look at it, I think there needs to be a pathway and an opportunity for talented youngsters. And I think here on Merseyside, I think we've probably been blessed with seeing quite a number over the Premier League years actually make the breakthrough. Local lads who have actually got into the first 11s at Liverpool and across the park at Everton, who can view their academies as reasonably successful. Liverpool has certainly seen the benefits of that at the moment. So it's a difficult one when you go lower down the spectrum and how Championship clubs view it. But I think it probably takes away a dream of an awful lot of young kids if that opportunity is snatched away from them. Really, I think we've seen the benefits big time, and it has become so much more difficult because even now Premier League clubs will scour the globe, particularly across Europe, and bring in young talent despite what they have in their academy. They can bring in young talent at a very reasonable cost from overseas, and that puts the blocks and the brakes on those that are trying to make the breakthrough from those that have been at the academy since a very young age. So it is a difficult one, and it's hard to see where the benefit is for Birmingham City in this particular instance. I think they're following the lines of Brentford, who introduce it, and maybe it's something that they see as a profitable area for the future if they're able to sell more of those players on rather than break through into their own first team.
Yeah, Steve, in terms of the things they've raised, they've said, look, it's a difficult catchment area competition to try and get the best young talent. And also they point to the difficulties in exposing the players to the right level of football. Is there an argument that the academy setup isn't an adequate training ground to get the levels up of young players, or does that not sit right with you?
I can kind of see both sides of this argument to an extent, and I base that upon having spoken to quite a few ex-players, and a lot of ex-players will have kids who then end up in academies or whatever. Like the talent is in the genes, and I can't tell you how many times I've spoken to people who say, "Oh, my boy's in the academy at wherever," and who say they feel it's not a great learning ground for them because it really isn't an equivalent for, in inverted commas, grown-up men's football. There's very little physicality in some of these games. Now, I can only tell you that as a kind of received wisdom from quite a few ex-players who are not happy with the way that their kids are developing in academies. I'm not talking about Liverpool there, just in general. On the other hand, I do have one experience. Not that long ago, I watched Manchester City's academy team play over at the Etihad campus. I was there on a Friday night. I was doing a game at, I think, Manchester United or somewhere on the Saturday. I had a Friday night in Manchester. City Academy were playing. I thought I'll go along. I'd never seen the Etihad campus and the little stadium they've got on the other side of the road. And I watched this academy game. City lost to somebody 1-0. They had like 88% possession, probably completed about 10 million passes in the game, but lost the game 1-0. And it was the most dull, sterile, boring football match I can practically ever remember watching. And, I was desperate to see some kind of, 32-year-old centre-half working his way back from injury clatter somebody, which is what you used to get in reserve team football, something to liven it up a little bit, because I can only tell you it was awful. It was absolutely desperately bad to watch. And I kind of had this feeling that the City youngsters, and there were some good players in there as well, Eric Garcia, Brahim Diaz, who's at AC Milan now, were probably sort of given a pat on the back as they walked off the pitch and said, brilliant, your pass completion rate was 99%. You made 532 passes and whatever. But they'd lost the game 1-0. It was so artificial and so sterile. I absolutely hated it. But having said that, yes, academies are a crucial link, I think, between clubs at Premier League level and the cities in which they are based, because it is the best way for a kid. And, Trent Alexander-Arnold wore the Liverpool captain's armband last night for the first time in the Champions League. Could that have happened without the academy at Kirkby? Would have happened without the academy at Kirkby? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I suppose from a Liverpool point of view, we're well into double figures now under Jurgen Klopp in terms of academy players who've made the first team debut and either done something or been moved on elsewhere. I suppose the argument from the Birmingham point of view, they've looked at Brentford perhaps. Alan, they did something similar 4 years ago, and the success rate they've had in going to this B team and selling players on and moving players around is quite incredible. Morpay, Mepham, Gray, Konza, Hogan, Woods, Jota, Watkins, bought for under 10 million, sold for over 100 million. So I suppose from that point of view, that there could be a financial sense to ploughing your funds into this route rather than an academy.
Yeah, they would have been even more successful financially if they'd made it into the Premier League by hanging on to maybe some of those players. It is a difficult one. And like Steve, I can see both sides of the argument. So, where do these lower league clubs go in terms of trying to strike that right balance? It is very, very tricky. We're not going to go back to Central League days. I'm sure Steve and I go back as far as that, where we did have 32-year-old, 20-stone strikers coming battering young players who are trying to make a breakthrough into league football. The game and the whole process and setup has changed absolutely dramatically from those Central League days, and it is not going to return. I know what Steve is saying in terms of these lads, preparing themselves for men's football and the contact that they actually receive in proper matches is very different to what's happening in the academies. But for Birmingham have obviously looked at the Brentford model and said this can work. Birmingham themselves have sold on a player, Jude Bellingham, to Borussia Dortmund, and he's now playing for England. So he presumably came through the academy there and has been a great success. But where do you draw the line? It's a difficult one, and one that will be studied by many clubs over time to probably get the best financial results from it, because that I'm sure will play a major part in how clubs approach this over the next few years.
I think, Mark, as well, I think this is, to a certain extent, Birmingham are a very, very severely financially constrained club, as I understand it. And running academies isn't cheap. It may be a decision born almost out of necessity. And that may be a route which more clubs at that level go down, because they simply can't afford to run an academy in the way that a Premier League club does. Now, any club in the Premier League should be able to afford to run an academy and benefit from it, but it might just be really financially difficult for Birmingham to actually do that at the moment.
Interesting with their academy, Jude Bellingham, who Al mentioned, his brother's actually at the academy as well, and is tipped to follow on, and interesting to see the pathway for him now. Mm-hmm. Okay, we'll wrap things up for this just now, and we'll come back for our final part in a few moments' time and look ahead to the weekend's Premier League action as the Reds head to Craven Cottage to face Fulham. Hello and welcome back to Press Box. Next up for the Reds is a trip to Fulham at the weekend, the start of the busy festive period. Al, how testing a time is this for football clubs? How big a part does it play in the overall positions in the table in your eyes?
I think we talk about it every year when December comes around, don't we? That this is the testing period for most Premier League clubs, particularly those that have just dealt with the final group stage of the Champions League, because they've played an awful lot of football, even more so this season, which obviously started later for reasons we're all very much aware of. So in that sense, it's a very important period. The Premier League table doesn't tend to take shape until 10 or 11 matches in, which is the stage we're up to now. So you can see exactly probably who's going to be contending for honours and who's going to be struggling in terms of trying to avoid relegation from the Premier League. And I think we've got a fairly clear picture as to those clubs that are struggling, and Liverpool are up against one of those at the weekend. So it is vital, because you're playing games every 3 or 4 days. There's always 6, maybe 7 league games in December for Premier League clubs to contend with. Those with the bigger squads, the better squads, will probably come through it more successfully. We've had the debate about 3 or 5 substitutions. The bigger and better squads tend to want the 5 subs, which is understandable. Scott Parker clearly doesn't, as far as Fulham are concerned, because he probably feel he hasn't got adequate in reserve to cover for those that he's got, who he picks week in, week out for his first 11. So it's a big month, but Liverpool aren't involved in the League Cup competition, which also has the quarter-final stages in December. So maybe a little better than they found themselves in last year when they had to, contend with a League Cup quarter-final and a World Club Championship in Qatar around about the same day, ridiculously so. So this time around, I think Liverpool will come through it in a much better state than they were last time around when they were performing magnificently. I think they'll get through December pretty well with players coming back from injury as well. So starting with a victory, you would feel it should be a formality against Fulham at the weekend.
Yes, 6 games for Liverpool from Fulham at the weekend through to Southampton, what is currently scheduled to be January the 2nd. At least all the games are on the same continent this December. Steve, what about Fulham just now? They did bring some players in just before the window closed. Have they improved a bit, or do they still have the deficiencies they seemed to have at the start of the season?
No, they've definitely improved. They started the season rather disastrously with Michael Hector and Tim Ream as the two centre halves, and just very quickly, I was doing an American radio show right at the start of the season, which Rodney Marsh was on. And, ex-Fulham player, of course, at the end of his career, and he was ecstatic they'd gone up and was sort of, thinking they were going to do okay. And I'm kind of patting myself on the back here, but I said, Rodney, you can't play Tim Ream and Michael Hector as a central defensive partner in the partnership in the Premier League. They'll get ripped to shreds because neither of them have any pace at all. And he did start the season with those two. They got ripped to shreds. And what Scott Parker has had to do, which is far from ideal, is completely rebuild his back five after the start of the season. If you include his current back four and goalkeeper, the only one who was even at the club when the season started was the left back Anthony Robinson, who they signed from Wigan in the summer transfer window. The goalkeeper came after the start of the season. So did Ola Aina, the right back. So did Joachim Andersen and Tosin Adarabioyo, who are the two current centre halves. So he's completely rebuilt that defence. It has more mobility, it has more pace, but it still gives opposition plenty of opportunities to score goals. And, Liverpool at their best would be looking, I think, to put Fulham away fairly comfortably at the weekend.
Yeah, out slightly better at the back, Steve suggests. Maybe a bit more of a threat as well. Ademola Lookman looks to have offered something as well. And they will be a team that will try and maybe take the game to Liverpool in a way that some others might not.
Yeah, they probably surprised us with a victory at Leicester recently, wasn't it? Although that was on their travels as well. There's a bit of an onus on them, I suppose, on home soil to maybe play in a slightly different manner. I was commentating on the game against Everton, where they were pretty awful in the first 45 minutes, but turned it around to the extent that they could possibly have got a point from the game at least. So I think they have got battling qualities instilled into that squad, which you'd expect from a Scott Parker side, but they found it difficult to integrate those players, really, as Steve has said. So many have had to come in, and it's gone to the extent that he's been leaving Mitrovic out of the side for the last couple of games, which is something you wouldn't have envisaged really when they were promoted. He was probably seen as the mainstay and the man who has experience of playing Premier League football as well to actually guide them to safety. Ademola Lookman is a good buy. Didn't quite get the opportunities that he maybe wanted at Everton. I think here he will probably play week in, week out and give Scott Parker and his Fulham side a few more options in terms of the width and the ability and his ability to cut inside and produce goals, which is already shown. So they are a side that Jamie Carragher said nothing is more certain this season than Fulham getting relegated, although I think he was revising his view after that victory over Leicester recently. He said that they were more certain to get relegated than Liverpool were to be champions. Not quite sure about that now. Maybe he isn't either.
I think the way the way they play is really interesting without Mitrovic, because they basically don't play a centre forward. Bobby Reid kind of plays almost as a number 10, sometimes can play wide right, as he did against Leicester. Loftus-Cheek has been quite a good acquisition for them. And Ivan Cavaliero is the other kind of forward player. So they kind of move around in rotation. And I think that gives Jurgen Klopp a bit of a problem as to who he plays centre half. Because if Fulham play Mitrovic, I think he'd play Nat Phillips against him, and it would be ideal opponent for Nat Phillips. But if they play, as they have over the last couple of games, without a centre forward, kind of just little tricky players flitting here and there and rotating around, then that's not, for me, ideal for Nat Phillips. But you know, I mean, Liverpool just have more quality in every position. But having said that, Fulham did play very, very well at Leicester and actually probably deserved the win.
I just wonder, in the bigger picture of things, whether the relegation battle this season now will go a little bit longer, a little bit further in the way that the top end of the table might do as well.
What, you mean Arsenal might be involved in the relegation battle? Well, I think Sheffield United are looking doomed already, aren't they? You know, the bottom four clubs, you may say, are going to struggle to actually extricate themselves from the positions that they're in at the moment. So I think, you know, if you look at the league table now, let's say it takes shape around about 10 or 11 matches, I can't see that altering too much in terms of the bottom 4 or 5 clubs. So they're the ones that have got a real battle on their hands to survive. And in terms of the top 6, we're seeing it already, maybe with the exception of Arsenal, who you might have expected to be in there. It is the big 6. Leicester have replaced Arsenal in the big 6 at the moment in terms of how the Premier League table looks. So I don't think you'll see too much altering over the course of December and January. Although that is the time where the picture can change probably quicker than any other period. But Liverpool should get the better of Fulham. Be interesting to see what side Jurgen Klopp picks, because he'll have an eye on Wednesday as well in a really big game at Anfield against Tottenham. Tottenham, of course, are playing Thursday night. They've got to play Sunday. So they're in the same predicament. Jose Mourinho will be picking his side accordingly for his Europa League game, you know, and for what they've got to face on Sunday. I think they're at Crystal Palace, aren't they, on Sunday afternoon? So that's a difficult game for them. But Jurgen Klopp will pick his side, I'm sure, with Tottenham in mind, knowing exactly how Tottenham are going to shape up and present themselves at Anfield on Wednesday night. So, which is a game that we're all looking forward to as well.
Great stuff, guys. A fascinating insight as always. That's us done and dusted for another episode of Press Box. We'll do it all again next week. Goodbye.